Welcome back to Uncharted, the Entrepreneur's Adventure Podcast, the show where we are redefining success through raw stories from the edge of burnout, breakthrough, adventure, and becoming. Now, today's conversation is for high performers, the people who look successful on paper but feel like they're quietly drowning underneath it all. Our guest today is Kyira Wackett, a therapist, coach, speaker whose work sits right at the intersection of shame, guilt, identity, burnout, and radical acceptance. And my God, this one goes deep and is so good. She opens up about growing up inside chaos, navigating childhood traumas, bouncing between homes, becoming the perfect high achiever just to feel worthy enough to stay in the room. Straight A student, captain of everything, future doctor, the one everybody pointed at and said, why can't you be more like her? But underneath all of it was exhaustion, fear, shame, and this relentless belief that success was the price of belonging. What unfolds in this episode is honestly one of the rawest conversations we've had about what happens when your entire identity is built around performance. We talk about burnout, grief, people pleasing, hyper independence, and the moment life punches through the noise hard enough to make you question the whole blueprint. This conversation is a masterclass in breaking ground, that first stage of building a life you would love to live, where you stop pretending everything's fine and finally tell the truth about the life you're actually living. Let's get into it. Kyira, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you've come from, and where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I'm super excited to be here. I love the work that you're doing. And as a solopreneur and a therapist / coach that works in shame, what you're doing is fantastic. And so, yeah, to jump us off, I would say present day now, I am, like I said, I'm a licensed therapist, but I work in the realm of coaching. And we can talk about that and some big shifts that I made there. But my focus is really to work with people in a one-on-one capacity. But then I also do a lot of corporate wellness and speaking events, all centered on these ideas of shame resilience, which is how to navigate through sort of the underlying fear we all have that we're not worthy of love, connection, belonging, and something called radical acceptance, which is learning to control what you can control. And I think like a lot of people that get into entrepreneurship, we get to a place that we are either healing ourselves, solving our own problems, or sort of leaning into a part of ourselves and our authenticity that maybe didn't get to the surface for many years. And so I am a child of complex trauma. I went through a lot as a kid. I had a single mom who struggled with a pretty severe drug addiction and some undiagnosed mental health issues. Mostly now as a therapist, I can say it was a lot of her own complex trauma that really went kind of under the radar as so many older generations' pain and suffering did. That led me to kind of hop from home to home. So I lived with her for the first 10 years of my life, and then I moved in and out of different family homes pretty much the rest of my life after that until I moved out on my own. And I think what happens to so many people, whether you experience trauma or not, is our whole drive is to find connection and belonging in the world around us. And when you're in a state of flux and the world around you is chaotic, you cling even more to trying to find that and to create some sort of centering. And as a person, I was always very academically kind of ahead. I think school a lot of times, particularly in the States, is how good you are at memorizing and performing. And I was good at that. So I always kind of did well, but it became a different level of performance when I went through a lot of this. So I was the kid that was National Honor Society president, the captain of every team, involved in every single extracurricular, the straight A student. I was very high functioning, high performing. I had multiple jobs. I was the kid that people would be like, I want to be more like you, or I don't know how you do it all. And the one that the parents would say, you should be more like her. And on the surface, that's great. Not really aware as a kid. A lot of what I did was around just trying to be the person people would want in the room. People would think is good enough. I didn't want them to know at the time I was on free lunch. My mom was in prison. I was living with my grandma. I had a lot of shame about my story. And so I think this idea that I needed to be both, I wanted security, I wanted predictability, and I didn't want anybody to think I was less than, really drove me to pick up any checklist I could to be successful and good enough. So I was going to be the doctor. I was going to get married to my high school sweetheart and his community of people where they all went to school together. Their parents went to school together. Everything was predictable and planned, and I could bank on it. And I would be the breadwinner so that I was secure and safe and no one could leave me like I had in my life. Everything was going to be about sort of a hyper independence, but also being connected to these communities where no one left. And again, I didn't know at 15 and 20 that that's what I was doing. But I reached a point in college where I just started to burn out. And right after I graduated college, I was still pursuing medicine. I was going to be a doctor. I had all these plans. And then my cousin, who I'd lived with briefly, and he was 2 weeks younger than me, was killed. And we were 22 at the time. And I had already been really in a state of burnout. I had been in the hospital in college. I was, again, very anxious. I had struggled with an eating disorder. But I was still like, no, this is the tunnel. This is what you have to do. If I can be these things, everyone will think I'm good enough. The world kind of imploded then. And my cousin was the type of person that never had that. He was like, I want to be a teacher. I want to be in these little, I think he was a first grade teacher at the time, maybe second grade, but he wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And he's like, I just want people to feel seen. He didn't care. He had no ego. He didn't care if anybody ever thought anything of him. And I think when he died, I kind of had this mirroring of, what the fuck are you doing? I'm now ironically married to a doctor. So obviously like there's some element of medicine I can appreciate and I believe is so important and valuable, but I hated everything about that job, that career choice. I hated most of my classes. I didn't like the relationship I was in. Everything was, I checked the boxes. I had everything at the exact time I was supposed to, and I was miserable. And so I took a lot of time. I took a few years, actually. I left the relationship. I ironically met my now husband at the time, was hopping from kind of different roles, figuring out what I would want. In college, I had been a peer advisor for underclassmen, and I was still connected to some of the career counselors at campus. And I reached out and I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I feel like I'm free falling and I don't know what the next steps are. And I kind of got some ad hoc therapy by way of career counseling around purpose and security and fear and shame and all these pieces. And long story short, over a few years of just being willing to try out different things and feeling like I was fumbling and stumbling, I ended up finding my way into therapy and becoming a therapist and realizing that so much of what I was trying to do in the world was to create opportunities for other people to not feel how I was feeling. And also coming through a lens of, but I have to be better than everyone because otherwise they'll never let me in the room with all of them. It was never that I didn't think other people were as good or better than me. It was, if I don't have these things that they would see as a value, they won't let me in their club. I won't be allowed in. And so again, long story short, my whole career now and a lot of my own personal work has been around figuring out how do we get to those places where we lose ourselves in the chase for checkboxes, and what does it look like to heal that, to recognize those patterns, to see them as adaptive when maybe we're kids or young adults, or for some of us even early in our careers, and then let that go to make the choices that really line up with who I want to be vulnerable, I remember when I dropped out of the med school application process, I was crying and I told my mom that my biggest fear is that people were going to think I couldn't do it. And I think for so many of us, that's such a fear for us, and it stops us from becoming entrepreneurs. It makes us burn out as entrepreneurs because this idea that we have to prove something kind of supersedes our ability to do the things that feel good. And so coming back full circle, it's where I am today. And I'm definitely still trying to unlearn a lot of those shame stories in my own work and what it looks like to create sustainable rooting in myself rather than this constant need to achieve and check the boxes so someone else on the outside will tell me I'm okay.
Yeah. And I hope you don't mind me saying, Kyira, it sounds like, just picking up on a thread as you were talking about then, there's this whole, ever since you were a kid, you've been more like Kyira. right?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like there's a lot of expectation and pressure put on yourself to be that kind of person. And so when you got to a certain point and you said, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
And you felt miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Did that moment have kind of like a knock-on effect on your, I don't know if worldview is the right term to use in terms of you as a person?
Yeah.
Is there anything behind that?
Yeah, I think so. Ironically, after my cousin died, I really struggled with, he was 22. He had just started, he was a year into his teaching career. And watching the impact that he had had on all these people and these tiny little humans that, I mean, he'd spend his weekends going to their soccer games or their football games, and he was so immersed in their life and he'd known them for just a few months. And it just kind of helped me think a little bit about what connection could look like and how so much of the connection that I had was scarcity driven. I had met my husband at that time and I was with him and in this relationship. And even in that relationship, it was, I am so afraid that people will leave that I'm going to do everything I can so that they stay. And it was less about being in my values and more about the scarcity mindset of, I just don't want people to leave me. And I think so much about what I chose, I was offered a full ride scholarship to art school and I turned it down, even though that's what I wanted to do, because my boyfriend at the time had told me that if I left, then we probably wouldn't make it. And I probably wouldn't be happy as an artist because we wouldn't have enough money and we wouldn't have these things. This other person's doubt, this other person's projection. I was so used to being guided by what everyone else thought. It was easy for me to give up my dreams. It was painful, but it was easy. It was like, well, yeah, of course, obviously, I'll stay in our home state. I'll go to the local college. I will do these things. I will get the job that's the security. Everything was about meeting those projections and expectations. And so when this happened and when I got to this place, I was actually in Nepal. I'd gone on a mission trip to do some health work, which was mostly just bringing medication to people in the Himalayas because they don't have access to a lot of different resources. And there were a few physicians that were on the trip with us that were providing basic aid. And we were doing this climb, and I forget what the name of the mountain is, but you had to basically climb a 45-degree peak all the way up to get there. And it was terrible. And we had sacks of potatoes that we were eating to like get sustenance as we were walking up this mountain. And I just remember at the time, I wouldn't say I was somebody that was good at pushing myself physically. So I was like, this is terrible. I hate everything. My life is pretty much over. I don't know if I'm ever going to be a doctor. My cousin died. The world sucks. I hate everything. And then I'm sitting on the top of this mountain, and that's really where it hit me. And it was this like, the world is so much bigger than this one story. And I think that was a lot of what it was. A lot of recognizing that I got so tunnel visioned on this one story that I was projecting onto everyone else around me at my own expense, but also at the expense of other people. I was not the person I could be because I was so busy trying to be some caricature of success that had been handed to me and that the world around me said. And so when I got to that place, it wasn't like an instant light switch turned on and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to be my full self and I'm going to be authentic and everything's going to be me. But it was a realization, kind of a bringing to the surface of the tension of who I had the right to be, who I could be, who I wanted to be, who I just was, versus the version of self I was being. And I think that tension had to come to the surface so I could sift through it and start to peel back those pieces. And I still am, to get to the places that I would get to moving beyond that.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how much I relate to that moment that you just shared there, where you're at the top of that mountain, and it's clarity's the right word in some circumstances, but not full clarity. It's just, It's kind of like you're stepping away from that noise, right? And it allows you to kind of open up to the awareness of what things that kind of truly matter to you. And that's why I encourage so many people to get out and be more adventurous and get out into the mountains and whatever it is for them. Because for me, it's pure freedom and peace and that freedom and clarity of mind as well. But just coming back to something you mentioned, you said it felt easy to potentially give up on your dreams. And at that time, by the sounds of it, did you know exactly what your dreams were, or were you the dreams that you had, were they aligned with what other people's expectations were, do you think?
I'm sure there was some element that was a mix of both, because I think regardless of if someone comes from a place of trauma and sort of insecure attachment, or they felt like they had this secure place and everything was relatively okay. We all have pain, we all have our own stuff, but the spectrum that you come from, I think at that time when you're in high school, early college, we'll say teens and early 20s, I think so much of who we've been to that point has been, what are the values that have been put on us? What are the expectations that have been put on us? We're just starting to break into that independent thought in a way that we can even answer that question of who am I if I'm not this? And I think, especially for me in the US, school up to 12th grades, up to right around the time you turn 18, everything is a guided expectation. There isn't this, let's explore what you like. Let's figure out what's going on. Who are you as a person? It's, well, what are you doing in your AP history class? Did you do well on this test? And so you don't have that same piece. And so I think there was some element of, I am this creative person that has this pain. Like that part was very clear to me. So advanced placement is what AP stands for. And it's essentially you're taking classes in high school for college credit. And in art, when you do that, you have to submit a portfolio and you have to have a theme. My entire theme was on being seen. Everything was about faces and clocks and this pain. And of course, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was trying to process these big feelings, this loneliness, this depth of self that I was hiding, because I didn't want people to know that my mom was in prison. I didn't want people to know that I was on subsidized lunch, or that I couldn't afford these same things, or I was working multiple jobs because I lived with my grandma who was in her 80s and didn't have the ability to pay for me to get the clothes that everybody else was wearing. And I was so busy, I think, hiding, that I didn't recognize that this self was coming to the surface. And so in that moment, I think I knew I was a creative person and I wanted to be in a state of exploring, healing, I don't know, I guess putting a light on emotions and the depth of the human experience, but I wasn't quite sure what that was meant to look like. And I think I just knew that doctor was a safe bet. And even then, like, there was some parts of that were authentic. I wanted to help people, but I didn't really care to do it that way. It just felt like the safest choice. So I think it was definitely like a tension. I don't know who I'm meant to be, but there's something here that's bigger that I haven't explored and I want. I think that's what art school would have done for me in that way. I don't think I necessarily wanted to be an artist. I did have my own art. I started an art business. I sold art for many years. I did shows. And I can attest to the fact that I don't think I ever wanted that to be my profession. I think I just wanted to explore something deeper than what I was doing that felt like it was simply a safe choice. And I was sort of done playing safe. And I also think I realized I didn't want to pick a life that was about hyper independence and security, but that's what every choice was, is how do I make sure that nobody can hurt me again, as opposed to how do I get to a place where I can allow trust and vulnerability on a personal and professional level in what I do moving forward.
Yeah. Just talking about your kind of journey from school then, and you mentioned that you've set up an art business. Did you say then? Mm-hmm. How did you get from there to where you are now, and what does that journey for you look like?
Yeah. I ended up working in a variety of different care type positions. And so while I was kind of figuring out what I wanted, I managed a gym and I worked on kind of mental wellness as it relates to fitness. I worked in-home care settings for kids with different developmental or physical needs that required more of kind of 24/7 support. I worked in kind of more like a nursing home setting, but in independent care living. I was constantly taking on roles, and I was drawn to roles of service and helping people. I eventually figured out that I wanted to work in mental health. And I think a lot of it was maybe my own healing and really wanting to be a voice to people that had gone through things that hadn't felt seen. In the mix of this, I was just creating art constantly. I was making my own art. I was always exploring things. I met some different people at networking events that were doing really cool art. There was a woman that had started an organization. It was called Gallery 99. And it was that everybody made art and you sold it for $99 or less. And the idea was, making and selling and buying art and building community around that where it wasn't so unattainable. And I was like, oh, I'll do that. I'll join this event. And maybe I'll put a piece up and see if it sells. Then it sold. And then I went to a few more shows and pieces that I made were selling. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I kind of like doing this. I like the community that I'm building. I'm liking the conversations that are happening. And I kind of happened upon starting a business because honestly, it was how much money do you have to make before you have to claim it on your taxes? And then realizing like, oh, I got to actually like now pay taxes on that. I should set up an LLC. And so I did that. And subsequently, I had started working for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And so I was loving that job. My job was community support and conversation. And then as I started my art business slowly became a catch-all. So I was selling art, but then I also was like, I think I want to start speaking. I think I want to do this. And so everything was like falling under this one business. And it was great for a while. I kept doing that. And then I eventually went on and became a therapist. So I was working as a therapist and then also had this business that was like corporate wellness and public speaking and selling art and doing this. And I was like, well, it's all centered on being seen. It makes sense. And then over time, I lived in Madison, Wisconsin at the time. I had subsequently moved out to the Pacific Northwest. And art was still a saving grace for me. It was what allowed me to process my feelings. When you move to a new location, it's a very lonely experience. I was starting my job out here. Art is big out here, so it's a great way to build community right away. I very soon, though, found myself realizing that art was never the thing I wanted to pay my bills. I remember this interview that Elizabeth Gilbert gave right after Eat, Pray, Love, and when she talked about her writing and her other works, where she said essentially this idea of what's the expectation you have of your craft and how do you know if it's meant to be your profession or if it's meant to be this hobby. And I realized I was resenting the fact that I was expecting my art to pay my bills because I was becoming performative. Same as the doctor, same as these other things. I was making the art that would sell, not making the art that I wanted to. And I was getting caught up in the external validation in the exact same way I had, just through a different lens. How many people invite me to a show? How many shows do I get in? How many sales did I have? And my mood was constantly dictated by the world around me. And so soon after that, I realized that I needed to let that go. I needed my art business to become just art again and not a business. And I think, we can get into this, but I think a lot of overlap realizing I was a therapist during COVID, which is really, really hard. And I had a new kid at the same time and I'm giving up art. And so it was a lot of like, what feels right to me and how do I build something sustainable because what I'm doing isn't. And really that's how I shifted my business. It was called Kind of Creative. I started my business Adversity Rising in 2021 because of all of these pieces and realizing, I actually don't want to do art to sell. I don't want to be in the therapy room in the same way. I want to build community and have conversation, and I want to make art my own thing. And all of that and kind of different iterations of trying to do it all and then realizing I can't. So what do I want to do? Then led me to doing what I do now, which is I'm still a licensed therapist, but everything I do is under that scope of coaching and speaking and really centering on community in all facets.
And how long did it take you to find that coaching and therapy was the route for you and was the thing for you?
I think the idea of becoming a therapist was really exciting to me once I started doing the exploration. I think that was something that I, again, had never really had. But when I left the kind of I'm going to be a doctor storyline and I tried on these different roles, I started to get clear on what do I actually like and what do I not like. And all the jobs were similar in the sense that they were caretaking, but gosh, were they so different? So I could go, what do I like? What do I not like? Who's the person I'm excited to be every day? And I realized the gift that I had and the thing that brought me joy was creating safe spaces and being able to see and say things to people, to hold up a mirror that built both compassion, but also sort of a radical honesty to people about what we can and can't control in our lives. And I think that was a lot of my own healing and the work I was doing on a personal level too. And so I was really excited by that. And going to get my master's was an empowering place to be because there's so much about finding your voice in there. Where I struggled was then honestly being a therapist, and anybody that's ever, it's different in different countries, but in the US, we're not paid well. And the practice to get into seeing people and the wait times and what that looks like and finding a match and how much you still end up having to pay out of pocket, it just wasn't a system that I felt good being a part of. And so it was a lot of needing to realize I do like having these conversations. I also don't want to burn out because I'm seeing 40 clients a week when I can't hold that many people's trauma stories at the same time. I want to be able to work with the people at the acuity level that matches what I'm able to give. And that was probably the hardest decision. Honestly, all these things of like giving up medicine, doing all these pieces, that was really painful. But probably the biggest values conflict I had was leaving therapy to start coaching and then sort of allowing that to become my own business, because it feels like in the story, at least here, is you're selling out to make more money, which in reality, I am getting paid more now. But it was never about that. And also it was about that to some degree, like that, if that makes sense. Like it's not, oh, I want to go get rich.
Absolutely.
Like coaching is not going to be the way that you get rich. It's also, I can't afford to spend hours in client care and averaging $15 to $20 back per client hour when that doesn't even factor in all the hours I'm seeing and working with their providers and all these other things. It wasn't sustainable, and it was going to lead to things that wasn't going to allow me to thrive. And so making those choices, though, that felt hard because it felt like there was a lot of judgment in a very different way. And then also the fear that when you go do it on your own, not only what are the people going to say, but how do you make sure that you're going to get paid to do it and have a sustainable business that isn't going to just, fizzle out in 6 months like so many entrepreneurship endeavors do.
Yeah. You mentioned something then about holding 40 people's trauma. And one thing I did want to ask, which it kind of links to really, was who did you go speak to?
Yeah. And
did you have someone that you could go speak to as well whilst you were holding that trauma for everybody else? Because you've got to get that out of you as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think one of the ways you can tell whether it's a therapist, a coach, any sort of helping professional, anyone that's listening, if you are in this field or if you've seen somebody in this field, it's a sign of somebody that's, I think, a good again, coach, therapist, whatever, if they're also doing their own work, because this is a process that's never done. And so I saw therapists for many years. I had some I think that was another reason I wanted to be a therapist. I had some really shitty experiences, just like people that weren't good at their job. And I was like, well, this is dumb. Why am I here for you to tell me something that is so stupid, honestly? And like, I don't mean it to be judgmental. And probably many people can relate to having had a therapist or someone that they're like, yeah, this was terrible. They asked me how I felt 7 times and I got nothing out of it. And I think that was a thing that made me want to go talk to more people, but I was also pretty diligent in finding people I could talk to. And so that would have been things like a supervisor in my master's program who I would go to and ask for support. That was the push to have group supervision where you meet with other therapists and you talk about what's hard, what's triggering, what's coming up in the room. I had a lot of my own stuff come up, and I think it's easy to say this because I'm working in mental health. So of course, mental health things could get triggered, but this happens in any context. So you could be selling homemade magnets and a customer interaction is going to trigger something for you that's based on an interaction you had with your dad as a kid, or it reminds you of your mom and how your mom approached these things and made you feel like a failure. And the sort of group supervision was an idea to be like, oh, this client's pulling this thing out of me. I can feel myself getting angry and I don't even know why. And it's probably our own stuff. And so that was really helpful in a variety of fronts. At the time, I was still doing art. It was honestly helpful to even deal with what did it feel like to be rejected there? Or when someone would be like, I can do that. I could make this thing. And how did that sit? As I continued moving forward now, particularly having my own podcast episodes are incredibly healing. But what I'll do is I'll meet with people and then I will pursue some of their services. So I have a person that's been on my podcast that I've met with to do some brain spotting, and I've met with this other person to do some inner child healing. And that's forced me to kind of be curious. And I think that for many of us that get into entrepreneurship, particularly, we've worked our asses off to get to wherever we are. Probably most people listening to this podcast are high functioning, high achievers that are used to being able to hold it all and usually holding other people's shit in the process. So there's this idea of I'm supposed to have it all together. That added layer when I work in mental health, that I'm supposed to be the one to have it all together, is absolutely present, because I'm supposed to be the one holding space for everybody else's stuff. And so I think there has to be this kind of radical acceptance that we don't all have our shit together, and you still need help, and you can't do it alone, and you don't need to do it alone, is really important. And I think then it goes to, are you willing to invest in yourself to then find the resources so you're not? And again, I think that comes back to, most of us would probably, maybe we're still even not even in the black yet. We're in the red in our income, but we'd figure out a way to like fund a best friend going to see a coach because they need it. But if we talked about us doing a business coaching program or a personal coaching program or some sort of wellness piece, they'd be like, nah, that's too expensive. I can't do that. I can't invest in myself. And so to answer your question, yes, I did. And I still do these things. Currently, I'm working with somebody doing some inner child integration work because it's been really helpful to think about how, as a business owner, these things get sparked up, how, as a mom, these things get sparked up, and finding different resources and supports during that time. But I would say the biggest thing I had to get over was the realization that I'm allowed to invest in myself, and particularly doing that and realizing that that is a gift I have to give not only me, but my clients. It makes me better at what I do to be willing to pay the money to do that. Because I'm fine to talk. I just feel bad paying for that myself and being like, that's okay. You're allowed to do that. And again, it's a testament to my commitment if I'm willing to show up for myself and the work I'm trying to do for the people I work with.
Yeah, absolutely. It means if you're showing up for yourself, you're going to show up to your clients so much better and in such a much better place as well. So absolutely love that. Once you took that leap into going down that business route where you're coaching them, what's kind of one moment maybe where there was just a lot of fear and doubt and uncertainty that almost made you pull back and not go ahead with it, but you still kind of pushed on anyway? Because I get the impression from talking to you, you're quite driven. All right, people. Quick pause to the conversation. And if you're listening to these episodes every week and you're thinking, this is speaking directly to me, then I want you to head on over to the Legion, because this is where you belong. Because here's the truth. You don't need more motivational bullshit. You don't need another productivity hack. And you definitely do not need another guru screaming at you to wake up at 4 a.m. and cold plunge your way out of burnout. What you need is space. Perspective, a tribe of people who actually give a damn about building a life that feels aligned, adventurous, and just meaningful, right? That's why I created the Legion. It's our private community for purpose-driven entrepreneurs, adventurers, and high achievers who are just done living on autopilot and ready to build a life that they genuinely love. Inside, you'll get exclusive bonus podcast episodes, deep dive coaching, mindset training, live Q&As, behind-the-scenes conversations, tools, challenges, and resources to help you reconnect with what actually matters. And on top of that, you get invited out to the mountains in the UK, whether it's in Scotland, in the lakes, in Wales, Snowdonia, and the Brecon Beacons, all that good stuff. You get invited to come on an adventure day. And this tribe is a room full of people choosing courage over comfort. It's people who know there's more to life than just making money and dying stressed. So if you're ready to stop spectating and you're ready to start becoming the person you were meant to be, head to the link in the show notes and join the Legion today. Now we'll get back to the show.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I think, so I had already launched my business at the time. I was working as a therapist. I had launched Adversity Rising and I was phasing out Kind of Creative. So Kind of Creative was it was the catch-all business. It had become more the art business. I was phasing that out, but I still had the security of my therapy job. So when Adversity Rising started, I think like many people, when they do start an entrepreneurship kind of pursuit, there is this, well, what's my protection plan? And I think that kind of helped me leverage into, I can take time to build because I have this thing. I have this security of this other piece. But I also very much, again, going back to my story, I needed, and I can say now you don't need it, but at the time I believed I needed everybody else's approval to be worthy, to be in the room. And so I was the person after a speaking event that would go through every single feedback sheet, every evaluation. What'd they say? Did everybody like me? Did they not like me? And I could get 9 5-star reviews, and then one person gave me a 3, and I'll be like, that's the only thing I'm thinking about. And we know this, our brains are programmed for the negative. But I can't remember if this was November or December now, but it was towards the end of the year, my first year in business. And I had put, because of COVID, so many things were going online. So I had put a bunch of my therapy handouts on Etsy because people were buying them, whether that was other therapists. A lot of people were like, I can't get in to see anybody. The world's terrible. I just need a handout on this. So I had put them all up on Etsy. And so we're talking $1 to $5 downloadables on this platform. I was not going to be paying rent with this income at this time. It was just a place to put them out there. And I got a 1-star review. I got a 1-star review from somebody that ordered a worksheet, and then their review had nothing to do with my worksheet, and I think probably everything to do with their pain. And I am saying this now from a clear-headed perspective, but at the time, the 1-star review was everything I was waiting for. It was the rejection by the world around me. So I get this 1-star review. I read it. I can't even make sense of it at the time. I remember noticing the clock, and I talked about this back then when it happened. It was like 14 minutes, I think. In less than 20 minutes time, I had already done all the investigative work to figure out what it would look like to shut down my business and any legal ramifications of backing out of the contracts I had signed for the next year, because I was going to shut my business down. Because this 1-star review felt like the spotlight was on me. She's a fraud. She's a failure. Everyone actually thinks this. You need to shut down shop. And which like now is laughable, but in the moment it felt like fight, flight, or freeze. It had triggered everything in me. All because one person didn't like a $3 handout. And I texted a person that I had been working with, that I had some contracts with for the following year. And I was like, hey, what do I need to talk to your legal team? Like some sort of like panicked text. She called me. And then there was sort of a conversation with her, a few other people, where I started to recognize the world wasn't ending. In that moment, it was like, by tomorrow, I'm going to have 1,000 1-star reviews. The whole world is going to cancel me. Nobody actually gave a shit. Like nobody cared about the 1-star review. I was actually still selling handouts in the course of that 24 hours after that happened. People were still buying them. I started to sit with this thing and be like, wait, but when is the shoe going to drop? When is this happening? I was still convinced I needed to shut down my business and that everything was terrible. And this is where I think, going back to your question right before this of talking to people helped, because I had conditioned myself to do that work. I knew I needed to talk through this with other people. And so I talked to a good friend of mine. I talked to other business owners. I went on some different platforms, some other therapy platforms, and was like, does anybody else have this issue? And I got so much feedback that built community around how often we get these reviews. And I had a person that really helped me to reflect on, was that about you or about them? Was there anything helpful for you in that review? Like as a business owner, we've all got to grow and get better. At the time, I wasn't a parent yet. Would you no, I was. She was little. And so I think there was some conversation around that. Like, you're going to screw up as a parent. Are you just going to throw in the towel every time you make a screw up, or are you going to learn from it? And so I was able to sit with it and read the review. And I was like, how do I want to show up to this? If I wasn't afraid of what would happen, how would I want to show up? And I decided that I had given that person, who became a representation of the whole world around me, so much power to dictate whether or not I was okay. And what I had to realize in that moment was, I don't know if that was male, female, gender terms, whatever. In my head, I think it was a man, probably my own childhood trauma of rejection. But whoever this person was, they didn't like me, or they didn't like my handout. It wasn't even me. How could I get to a place I could be okay with that? How could I get to a place that I was willing to be okay with not everybody liking me? could I accept the responsibility of learning to be okay with that so I could put my work out there for the people that needed it, wanted it, and would receive it? And that, I think, was the most healing process for me. I ended up replying to this person's review. I refunded their money, even though they never actually requested a refund. And I ended up silently or kind of independently writing a letter back to them that was basically like, what the fuck? This is the dumbest thing. Like, you're going to ruin a small business over a 1-star review. And I can see that you never even downloaded the handout, which means it wasn't even about that. It was about something with you. That was my separate conversation. My conversation back to them was essentially, I'm so sorry about that. I've issued you a refund. Please feel free to reach out if you need anything else. And things moved on. And I found myself feeling free. And I think that time had to pass, obviously, to get out of that state. But the more time passed, the more I realized if I'm not willing to be unlikable, I'm probably not saying anything valuable. And if I'm not willing to tolerate the distress of the world not all loving me, I'm probably just blending in. And so starting to recognize that and to realize that if I'm willing to move forward, I have to be okay. I mean, my voice right now is in my head, my shame voice going, probably somebody's thinking you're talking too much. Probably one of these listeners is going to turn it off because you probably don't have shit to say. Why are you on this podcast? Like, I can hear it in the background, but it's how much more airtime am I going to give that voice over this drive and this decision to say, I actually know I'm a good person and I know my intention and I don't need to be perfect, but I need to be willing to be seen, because that's what I'm trying to help other people be able to do. And that vulnerability risk is something I have to be willing to take on. And I think after that, it's not easy. It's not easy when I don't get accepted into something, or if someone doesn't like me, or I have a consult and it doesn't work out. But I've been able to realize, I think, and recenter that the world doesn't revolve around me. Like, that person, I didn't really matter that much to him or her, or again, whoever. Why did they matter that much to me? And how do I like stay in my lane? And that's really where radical acceptance comes in. I can't control that, but I can control how I show up. And if I keep being willing to put the work out there to be a part of something bigger than me.
I'm so glad you talked about that inner voice at the back of your head then, about even just being on this show, because I was thinking as you were talking, then there's going to be so many people who can relate to that exact situation. I know I can as well. Someone left a comment on one of the podcast episodes on one of the little shorts that were put out, and I got so angry at the time. I was like, how dare you?
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, how are you now in terms of managing that inner voice? Because it's obviously something that isn't the flick of a switch. It's a continuous journey to be able to manage that and keep moving forward. You mentioned that you asked yourself a question: how would I show up if I wasn't afraid, or something along those lines? If I wasn't filled with fear, how would I show up? And I thought that was a beautiful question to ask yourself. So, talk us through how do you manage that on a day-to-day basis, because it sounds like you've been struggling with this kind of thing ever since you were a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you manage it moving forward? You're obviously getting better at it every day, but how do you manage that?
Yeah. So again, my sort of area of expertise is in shame, resilience, and radical acceptance. So that shame is the fear of not being worthy of love, connection, and belonging. Everyone has it, no matter your life circumstances. So that comparative suffering thing that we do, where we're like, but my life was better, or I have this, so I shouldn't be that way. No, you're a human. You require connection and belonging. And there's the biggest fear that we're not going to have it. And we're not going to be deserving of it. That shame creates an inner tension in us. It does lead to the development of that voice. For some people, it is louder. It's more pervasive. Absolutely. But everyone has it. The thing that I have found that helps me the best is to practice radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is the ability to accept what I cannot control and to focus on the things that I can. And the radical piece of it is saying, I don't have to like it, and I can allow my feelings to show up around it. I'm just not going to try to fix it. So I don't have to like that people don't like me. I don't have to like that. It doesn't have to feel good. I don't have to have a neutral reaction to it. I just can't control it. And so one of the things I've gotten really clear on, we cannot control our thoughts, but we control our beliefs. So if you think about watching a busy street and hundreds of cars going past you during rush hour, all of those, think about those like your thoughts. If you're just sitting there staring straight ahead, you're going to have hundreds of cars going in both directions. You're not controlling them. You just notice them going by. But if you fixate on one car that's driving in a specific way, that's going to be where your attention goes. You're going to be missing all these other thoughts that are coming by, all these other cars that are driving by. And all you're going to notice now, the more you fixate on that one car, are cars that are similar to that. So if I suddenly start noticing this red car, well, now I'm going to be noticing all the red cars. If I'm paying attention to this white car that's driving a specific way, now I'm going to pay attention to other cars that drive that way. You're starting to look for these commonalities. You create a bias in your thinking. And so for me, it's recognizing those thoughts are going to keep coming up because, again, I'm a human and shame is a part of the human experience. I wish it wasn't. There is a world I could imagine where it's not. We're not going to have that in our lifetime. We exist too deep in the comparative suffering and worth dynamic. We're not going to get rid of it. So instead going, all those thoughts are like cars that are passing. Are there other cars I'm not noticing because I'm getting caught by that? Or do I want to take that car? Do I want to look at those white cars today? Could I notice cars that are maybe not playing their music way too loud and annoying? Or the cars that are driving safely? Or the cars that are SUVs versus this? And just starting to consider differences. And that neutrality helps me to focus on, I can control whether or not I give that airtime. So now what I can do is I can tell you those thoughts are there. I can see all those cars, but there's also cars that are going in my head of how well I can articulate my point, how well I can use examples now to help support what I'm saying that don't make it all about me, but can still support the audience, how I can show up with better lighting and how I can notice these things and how I've evolved as a speaker. Those thoughts are going through my head too. So it's just which ones am I holding on to? The best place I can get to is where I'm not fixating on either end. Because if we get caught on either end of the spectrum, we're going to be outweighed by both sides. But to just notice from a neutral place, right now I'm here, I'm talking, I'm showing up and giving whatever my 100% is in this moment. The rest doesn't really matter. I can allow that just to exist and be the cars passing by me. So that is, listeners, the biggest thing I can tell you is if you can get to that place of neutrality, and we can talk more about radical acceptance too, but if we can get to that place of neutrality, it allows us to not have that reactive feedback loop that gets us caught there where you end up latching onto one of those thoughts. You finish a conversation, you finish an interview, you finish something and you go, what happened? I can't even tell you what happened because I was so in my head ruminating or perseverating on this thing that took me out of that moment and I couldn't be there. And then we're in that feedback loop.
Let's get into an example here then. So what's one tool to help somebody with that neutrality and get to that? If you could talk through maybe one tool that you know.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing that I use is, because it's something we can do over and over again, is the concept of using a control wheel. So control wheel is basically have a piece of paper and on the piece of paper, draw a circle. And inside of the circle, you're going to write in my control. Outside of the circle, you're going to write out of my control. And you could do this we could use this example of the thoughts coming up in my head right now. Maybe we get off the podcast call and I'm ruminating a little bit. It could be you had a weird interaction with a friend. Maybe you're kicking yourself for something you said to your kid and you think you're a bad parent. It could be a future thing, like telling somebody no. Maybe you got a client request and you're going to actually say, no, that's not something I'm going to do, or a contract renegotiation, or a boundary you're setting with a family member that you're not going to talk about these things. Whatever's coming up for you, what you're going to do on the inside of the circle is write down everything that you can control. On the outside of the circle, you're going to write everything you can't control. And what you're going to notice is how many of your thoughts, and you'll just kind of think through the situation. If I imagine saying no to somebody, I had that come up recently with a consult with a client that they were not the right fit. Or you and I are both podcasters. We've definitely had people we've turned down because they're not the right fit. How do you say that to somebody? So if I go, okay, what's in my control? Being honest with this person that they're not the right fit for the podcast. Well, the thoughts in my head are they're going to be hurt. They're going to be upset. They're going to give you a 1-star review to retaliate. And they're going to kickstart all that old shit again in your brain. They're going to tell everybody else you're terrible. They're going to report you in the podcast group that you're in on Facebook, and everybody's going to kick you out. Okay. All those are thoughts that I have. Do they go in the circle or outside the circle? outside the circle because I can't control that. But I can control whether or not I say yes to this person out of fear and because I want to prevent them from saying something shitty about me, or because it's the right fit for the podcast. And the key piece in the beginning for us as we're doing it, we're not trying to do anything other than put it on paper, just to see how it starts to feel, to start to recognize in and out of our control. That's the first practice. Over time, the more we do that, we start to look at, and what do I value? So again, in my control is whether or not I invite them on the podcast. Okay, if I invite them on the podcast, I'm going to potentially prevent them from giving me a 1-star review and hating me and being upset. I'm also going to probably waste an hour talking to them when I know it's not the right fit. I'm not going to show up as present. I'm going to be annoyed at myself, probably going to be a little irritated with them. Not because they're doing anything wrong, because I'm the one that invited them, but I'm going to be annoyed. And then I'm going to struggle with wanting to air it. I'm not going to want to edit it, so I'm going to put it off. And then I put it out there, and it's probably going to be shit because I know it's not the right fit for my podcast, so I might lose listeners, and you play the domino. And then I have to come back to which one's more important. My fear wants me to invite them on the podcast because I want to be liked. My shame says I'm not worthy if somebody doesn't like me. But if I let that go, gosh, I don't want to be the person that my listeners thinks sells out because I want to be liked. I don't like that feeling. I'm actually going to say no. And I'm going to be okay tolerating that. Again, going back to that radical acceptance. I don't like it that I'm saying no and I might cause them rejection, but I'm going to work on how to tolerate that distress because again, my values at the end of the day and what I can control in that circle are going to lead me to say no because it's the right fit for who I want to be and how I want to show up in my business.
I love that. That is a tool that can be used in any situation.
Yes.
Any situation. So thank you for that. One question that's popped up in my head as we've been talking, which I want to ask, and please feel free to tell me to do one. But it's, do you think you would be as driven as you are, as successful as you are as a therapy and a coach, and where you are now, if it wasn't for all that expectation, that shame and that guilt? Do you think you would be where you are now without all of that? Or would you be doing, I don't know, working some 9-to-5 job somewhere, not living on purpose?
You know, I think obviously I'm doing a little bit of reverse fortune telling because I've got the outcome of where I am and what I've experienced. And so there's an element of maybe I would have gotten into the exact same place. But I think a lot about how I show up in the world is a direct result of the experiences I had before that, as it is for anybody. And so maybe I could have gotten here without a lot of the really severe trauma. Like, I don't think when my mom was struggling with drug addiction and some of the stuff that happened with that, I don't think I needed to experience all that to get here. But I do think I needed what so many of us have unfortunately had to go through, which is this feeling of loneliness that comes in the performance. And I think because now I see my 5-year-old and she has a very different life than I had. She has a 2-parent household with people that actually like each other, that show up. There's consistency. There is all of this, again, quote unquote, beautiful, stable, secure life. She's still going to have hardship. Stuff's still going to be hard. I'm going to fuck her up in some way. That's like what we do as parents. I know that, even if she has the most stable thing. And I think she exhibits a lot of that kind of go-get-itness, and she's got these expectations and she's going to internalize it. And I hope she has that same drive. But I think where so many of us, at least in these generations now, are at is that we came from a place of conditional love and acceptance. And as we're healing that, we're coming face to face with a version of ourselves that we have kind of a fight to try to bring to the table. And we still got a lot of shit to work through with it. I think that's the sort of emotional lacking that we had as kids. But I think there's this kind of go-get-itness that comes from that. My hope is that future generations don't have to go through that piece and years of performing, but can learn to be present without the performance. They're still going to do it in some way. But I think for me, the reason I'm now good at what I do is because I can see when other people are performing, and I cannot afford to be held back by the fear of what they're going to think if I don't say something, because I know what it feels like to not. And so when I have a client, I can see it. I can call out that you're performing. I do it too. We can't keep doing that if we want the life we want to lead. And so I do think there is a piece of that. I think that hopefully As we all do this healing work, though, I think some of us are still struggling, and that go-gettedness and that dedication, unfortunately, is still a drive to try to heal and prove something from when we were kids. So what I would like to see is that drive is there, that drive to be our authentic self, that drive to pursue at a high level, but not as a means to try to heal our past selves, but more as a means of this is what feels good. And I think that is something that many of us don't quite know how to differentiate yet. And again, hopefully, at least for my family, I'm trying to break that cycle so that she can have the drive, but not this kind of messed up dynamic of maybe inner child healing. So when she gets a 1-star review, she gets to be equally miserable, but not go back to feeling like she's the 7-year-old whose mom leaves because she wasn't good enough, and that the world is going to have this view of her as less than. That's something I don't think we have to have at that depth to be driven.
Yeah. What a beautiful mission to have is to do that, what you were just talking about with regards to having that drive, not just to heal, but to move forward with your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that. Thank you for that. What's one, if someone was just starting their own entrepreneurial journey now, they're standing at the start of their own adventure and they're kind of unsure what step they should take or whether they should even take that first step in whatever that adventure of entrepreneurship is going to look like for them. What's potentially one bit of advice you would give them drawn from your own experience?
I think the thing that I struggled with, because there was a time where I think I had like 7 or 8 different programs that I was offering in my business, and I still had my art business going. And so I was doing all the things, again, for what's going to sell, what's going to get the most traction, what is everybody else going to want. And there's a degree of that in entrepreneurship where we have to think about how are we solving a problem for ourselves, for other people. There is a factor of what's marketable, what's going to have legs. But I think at the end of the day, you have to take that off the table, at least in the beginning, to decide what lights me up. Why do I want to do this? What brings me joy and fulfillment? Going back to even that Elizabeth Gilbert piece, am I okay with asking this thing to pay my bills? I think that happened a lot in COVID, where people took their hobbies and became entrepreneurs. And if they were honest with themselves, I don't think they ever wanted them to pay their bills. I think there was just this idea that, well, everyone can be an entrepreneur and you should be making more money and you should be doing this and look at social media and everybody can be an influencer. I don't know why you're not making money with your Amazon reviews. Like there's this pressure and this kind of communal driven expectation of that to go, gosh, is this really what I want? Do I want this to be the thing that pays my bills? And am I okay if it doesn't? Am I okay if it fails? And I think some of those questions, I'm not saying the answer has to be, yes, you are okay. Maybe it's no, I'm not. Maybe that's I'm driven enough to make it happen. It's just getting curious about what comes up. And I think the biggest thing that I think about, because I'm still struggling with this, again, I used to want to be the person that was like Mel Robbins status as a speaker. I wanted to be on every stage. I wanted to be traveling around the world. And then I had my daughter and I don't. I want to be at every fucking Taekwondo practice. I want to do my work. That's important to me. I want people to feel seen, but I love being there for her and I want to do both. And so being super honest with ourselves about what do you actually want? And for me, it was being honest about who's the person I'm going to be excited to be every day. And how do I put that in the context of a full life? I'm not just an entrepreneur, the same as I'm not just Everly's mom. So how do you think about who I want to be, why I want to do this, and just get curious? And I think it's not answering your question of one thing to do. I guess if I had to summarize it as one thing, it's spend some time being curious and just really reflecting on that and what is the why behind it and really being honest. Because when I look back, the reason I did so many of the things that I did isn't because it was right. It was what was right for me. It was what everybody said. I'm not on social media anymore because it's not right for me. I don't like who I become when I post all over social media. Guess what? It means I have a fuck ton less support as a business owner because I'm not out on social media. I'm not going to grow in the same way. And I'm okay with that. I'm also okay with dealing with people telling me I should be doing something because I'm very clear on why I don't. So I think all of us just getting really rooted is that first step. So as you move forward, kind of think about like, a tree that's going to break as soon as the wind blows too hard versus like a palm tree that's designed to move and flow but knows itself and it's secure. How can we be a palm tree? So everybody can weigh in, we can have our thoughts, we can get our 1-star reviews and our 5-star reviews, and we're still centered on what we're doing, and we're not losing ourselves in the doing, but rather we're becoming something as an entrepreneur.
As you were talking then, I was smiling because you were literally describing the journey I went on. It's COVID hit. It's like, right, okay, what can I do?
Yeah.
And then I tried so many different things.
As did most of the world. Again.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What's one, just to kind of start to wrap this up, because it's been an amazing conversation. What's one kind of big dream or adventure that you want to go on that you haven't been on yet? Maybe you've had something percolating in the back of your mind that you haven't just taken that step towards yet.
I mean, I think my biggest dream, which is only so much in my control, is I want to give a TED Talk one day. I really want to do that. I think there's something about the caliber of person that's on the stage that I want to get to that place that I would be invited to do something like that. But then I also think again about, because I can't control that one other than to just keep showing up and keep doing the best I can. The thing that's in my control is, and I've really started to reframe this, is to think about how what I do in my personal life adds value to my business, and what I do in my business adds value to my personal life. And so some of my biggest goals are to speak in places that allow me to take my family to go to places I wouldn't have gone. And that makes it so much more accessible because I can get my travel covered, or I can do these things, or you know what, mom's got to go speak here, so let's go do this and let's have this adventure. And I think that for me, it's figuring out how I integrate all of this to live a full life rather than get stuck in feeling like there's something wrong because I didn't make a certain amount of money this year, or I only have X clients, or I didn't get into this speaking event, but more, how does all of this blend together in a way that feels authentic and truly who I want to be for the long run?
Nice. And what's one place that you want to go speak at?
You know, I think probably, it's somewhere in Europe. Honestly, there's a lot of conferences in the UK that are really cool, and so I've like always wanted to go over and do a conference over there. There's also, we were talking about this, I know offline, but I've had the opportunity to do quite a few speaking events with people that are in Australia, and they're like these powerhouse women working in the field of mental health and body image. And it'd be so cool to like go do some big event in Australia with these powerhouses and kind of see that come to life too. And so probably those two places stand out to me the most. And also just because I've had the opportunity to connect with the most people in those areas and know of conferences, but I'm sure there are conferences in the most random of places that would be fun. And if I were to ask my daughter, hers would probably be Orlando because she wants to go to Universal Studios because she wants to go to Harry Potter World. So, which I'm all about. But like, she doesn't quite understand yet that it could be bigger than that. So we'll see. But to me, anywhere that I can go and explore, I'd ideally down the road like to go to places where I'm forced to learn a new language, because that's something that is really important to me. And sometimes I'm a little bit externally motivated to take those things on. So it'd be fun to go somewhere where I would at least try to attempt part of what I was saying in another language, which would also be super fun too.
That'd be good. I know when I went traveling about 10 years ago now, oh God, even longer. Oh my God, 13 years ago now. We went to Sweden, Finland and Norway, and everybody spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
And I have never felt so ignorant in all my life for not even bothering to try and learn any of their languages. At the time, I was like, it's fine. Yeah. It's fine. They all speak English. It's all good. And then when I got there, I was like, oh my God, I feel so embarrassed.
Yeah. Yes. And like just the willingness to try a little bit with it, but you don't realize it until you've done something and you're like, wait a minute, that's like a little entitled, because everyone just assumes everybody speaks English. I want to be the person that's willing to feel stupid because I can't say it right, because I am the person coming into someone else's community. So, you know, maybe testing it out on stage, giving a talk isn't the best place to try to do it. But again, we're modeling the things we're trying to practice in the world. So yes.
Yeah. I was the tosser who turned up ignorant and was like, don't worry, they all speak English. It's fine.
Yeah.
I was at Belland. So, Kyira, what have you got going on now that our listeners can look you up on?
Yeah, so you can find me on Adversity Rising. That's my website. You'll be able to check out all the different things I'm doing, YouTube videos, podcast episodes, upcoming programs. In the spring every year, I do something called Liberated Living, which is a 3-session small group series to help people walk through kind of understanding the emphasis of radical acceptance and boundaries. And it's fun because you get to do it in this kind of small group setting with everybody working through it. There's a little bit of that kind of vulnerability, risk-taking everyone's doing together. That's been really, really fun. So for people to do that, I'm actually going to be launching a new program in the fall as well. And so if people are interested in what's coming up in 2026, probably the best thing to do is to jump on my email list and stay in the know when all those new things are coming out too.
Excellent. And we'll post links for everybody in the show notes so they can get onto your email list as well. Excellent. Kyira, it's been such a great conversation. I found myself engrossed in what you were talking about and what you were saying, so I could listen to you all day. So thank you very much. You provided so much value and some good tips for people as well.
Thank you.
That I think will really help people. So thank you. It's been great having you on.
Thank you so much.
Have you ever felt like business should be more than numbers and deadlines? Like there's an entire world to explore beyond your office walls? Is adventure calling your name? I'm Ian Whitehead and I'm your guide on Uncharted, the Entrepreneur's Adventure Podcast, where I bring you real stories from visionary leaders who've built empires and climbed literal mountains. Because success isn't just about the bottom line, it's about the thrill of taking risks, the courage to pursue what truly lights you up, and the freedom to chart your own course. Each week we'll dive deep into the minds of boundary-pushing entrepreneurs and adventurers, revealing how they found purpose in the chaos and discovered their true north, both in business and beyond. So, if you're ready to break free from the ordinary, embrace bold action and inject a little more adventure into your life, welcome to Uncharted. Your journey starts here.